Hello everyone and welcome to Helix Cloud Games. My name is Richie and this is CloudQuest, a cloud gaming show where we take a deep dive into one particular topic. On this week's show we're talking about Stadia and who they should buy, who's left out there in the market with the video game consolidating. And joining me on this quest is none other than Mr. Chris.
Let's see some investment.
Hopefully. But before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit that bell icon for notifications when all of our great shows go live, such as the Sounds of Stadia podcast every single Monday on YouTube and podcast services, where you can also get this show, and our live streams, which are every single Thursday, apart from this week, because Chris and I are in Poland. Instead, you get a first look of Overcooked. I think we both agree that Google aren't investing enough in games into Stadia. I think that's a given. If you disagree with that statement, let us know in the comments why. I'd be very interested to hear why. But we're talking before the show and we're kind of thinking Google really need to start investing in some game development studios before Sony and Microsoft buy them all.
Yeah, that's the kind of crux of it all, isn't it? It's not that... We're not saying they need to go out... I mean, if you rewind the clock when they had Stadia Games Entertainment, we realised they didn't want to do everything in-house. Getting a game development production company up and running from the ground was clearly too much of a task, whether it was funds or talent, whatever that was. They had the idea, they binned it after a year or so into Stadia going live. However, the way the video games industry is now... Everybody is being snapped up, and I know there'll be people out there who say the business model works, they need reinvestment, or they don't need to invest, the games are coming. The reality is, the problem we've got is the last 2 years have shown us that the biggest pieces of talent are being snapped up by every bigger fish in the pond. Activision Blizzard, gone, off the table. Bethesda, gone, off the table. Bungie, gone, off the table. PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, they all have their own exclusive studios grafting away at filling out their games library. Indie titles get snapped up onto subscription services left, right and centre every single month. The slightly interesting games, they're gone. Games that are coming to the platform, remember Chia, whatever it's called, Richie, was coming to Stadia, exclusive to PlayStation now, gone. Supermassive, working on a horror title exclusive to Stadia, gone. The Quarry comes out this June on PlayStation and Xbox.
Suspect that was formerly a Stadia game.
Oh, definitely. Money needs to be invested into the platform to make it better. That's no denying. You've got to spend money to make money when it comes to business. And in a world where every studio is being bought up, and there's rumours this week, we covered it on the Sounds of Stadia podcast, EA looking for a merger or an acquisition deal. Ubisoft a few weeks back, they're looking to be bought. We've got to ask, does Stadia need to reinvest in some studios, get back in the studio game, to simply survive, like to have an output of games that aren't exclusive elsewhere? What do they need to do?
I mean,
where do we start?
Before we start breaking down some of the potential candidates that they could look to purchase, there's one concept I want to throw out, because I don't think it necessarily has to be an outright purchase. It could be investment. Mm-hmm. They could take the Tencent approach and buy shares in a lot of companies and have just attached to that. So, like, we know EA and Ubisoft especially are kind of fishing around trying to almost sell themselves at the moment. What if Google comes in and goes, we'll buy 1/3 of the shares, we don't care who the other go to, but the guarantee is that it comes to, your games come to Stadia. Here's a bag of cash.
That could be an option. I think that's a smart way of doing it without rocking the boat too much, because if you went out and bought somebody outright, and when we keep saying outright, we don't mean outright games, just to clarify. But yes, they could do. That could be a potential one, but they're just a publisher though. When it comes to actual developers and these big third party studios, if they just get some stakeholder interest, so they have a say when it comes to the production pipeline or who they're working in partnership with. It's kind of how you see Sony have shares in Epic, and then funnily enough, lots of marketing for Fortnite and cross PC titles. They're on the Epic Game Store, and vice versa. Sony gets promotion for Fortnite. because it's a vested interest because you have shares in said company.
And because Sony have shares in Epic, anytime a sale goes through on Epic, Sony get a kickback from that. So this is why I kind of think maybe the solution isn't necessarily buying development studios, it's investing in publishers.
Mm-hmm.
So
where
if
would
you say,
invest?
Let's start with EA because they're the most recent one we talked about in the Sounds of Stadia podcast.
We did.
So my thought is that, for example, Google invest in EA, not necessarily in the games elements, but in the publishing. So any EA games that is published on another platform, Google can get a kickback.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I could see these deals going. Because I've got a feeling that if Google went to the table with EA to buy EA outright, EA might just go no.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless it's like, yeah, you're still going to, or maybe a conditional sale, like, you can buy us, but you have to commit for the next 10 years to put the games everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Which would be fair. But I do think that would be damaging for the wider games industry. Like, as Stadia fans, I don't want to see EA games be taken away from my PS5 or Xbox players or
that
Nintendo
would be the nature
players.
of that deal. If I'm at the board in EA, I'm assuming the entire board is like really passionate about EA, about the games, about the industry. They're looking to sell maybe because of the way the industry is going.
Yeah.
Maybe they feels like, I talked about a bit of almost like protectionism, like this is why they're looking for a merger. So by merging with another company, they can become bigger so they can stave off the likes of Microsoft or Sony.
Yeah, it almost safeguards you from outside takeover, doesn't it?
But with that sort of mindset, if someone buys it, you can put conditions in the contract for purchase to say that Google can legally obliged to bring out the next 10 FIFA games to Sony and Microsoft.
Yeah. Well, FIFA games. You mean EA Sports FC?
EA Sports titles. Yeah, I was using FIFA.
Yeah, I know. I think you're completely right, and I think you'd like to think the regulators of the games industry would step in and say, like, this acquisition can only go through if you promise
regulators in the
that.
gaming industry. There isn't any.
Well, the people who try. The people who try. But in terms of licenses like that, what it would do for Google and Stadia is, it would bring in either a guaranteed list of titles, which they need for future growth. I don't care what anybody says. If we don't get the next FIFA, if we don't get the next Madden, if we don't get the next Jedi Fallen Order, if things like It Takes Two don't start coming, Lost in Random, the little indie titles, then that's another big arm of the industry you're missing out on this platform, which is not going to help growth. Not having EA games on Stadia will not help Stadia grow. Fact. That's a fact. Having them will, 100%. That will help them.
Whatever your views on EA are, because we know they are a controversial company, there's no point in denying that. Mm-hmm. And I personally have a love-hate relationship with the sports games. I think they're terrible, but I'm also addicted to them. They are some of the biggest, the tentpole games for the industry.
Yeah, completely. And if
not
you somehow
having them
think,
is a problem for your platform.
Yeah, it is. And if you think all like future titles like the next Battlefield or the next Need for Speed won't benefit the platform, then you've probably got to have a look at your head, get it checked.
I think the only company that gets away with not having EA Sports titles on the platform is Nintendo, but that's only because Nintendo's first party offerings are so incredibly strong and have that legacy behind them that they're able to. No, people don't buy into a Nintendo platform for FIFA. They buy into it for Mario, for Zelda, for Splatoon, for Pokemon. Like, they're very. Yeah. This is why I always say Nintendo a very different ball game. They've got the kind of own very, very solid niche. Mm-hmm. Google Stadia doesn't have that strength in their niche yet.
And they've got legacy as well, but I think with the purchase of EA, I think more so than the IP and the licenses, it's bringing on board professionals and studios who already know what they're doing. It will just help elevate the talent pool that Google and Stadia have to implement in the future. So you might not see anything exclusive to Stadia now, but having those people internally will maybe allow you to start creating some more internal teams or help work on ports a little bit faster. Or in theory, just help really just drive some profit to, as you said, to come into the business to then fund future games and investment and projects without having to go and white label the shit out of everything. And I think EA, they're looking for a merger and acquisition. Again, the reality is I don't think Google are in this type of market. I think if they were, they would have done it early doors. Like, imagine if we saw a world where they had Stadia Games Entertainment, they went out and bought the Jenny the Savage Planet developers, Typhoon Studios, they went out and bought them. Like Embracer, they acquired a couple people. Maybe 3 years down the line, they would have picked up Tomb Raider from Square Enix. Like, all those little moves could have happened because Google has the capital finance to fund them. They just don't seem to be in the world of splashing that much cash to buy stuff.
I think at the time I was very excited to see what Stadia Games and Entertainment would bring to the table, but I always said it's going to be years before we see anything. Yeah. So it might have been literally this summer the first time we were hearing about he's the first title coming from Stadia Games and Entertainment. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, I think the smarter move would have been Stadia Games and Entertainment rather than being like the overarching thing for a development studio that they serve as Google's in-house publishing studio. Mm-hmm. And then they can make purchases of already established studios to work under that label.
Yeah. So EA, off the table?
I think EA are off the table largely because I think to buy them would be more money than Google would be willing to pay at this moment in time. And I think EA might be nervous about the whole... their own legacy.
Yeah.
Because they are a legacy company, whether you like them or not. But yeah, I can't see it happening.
No, me either.
Even if Google were in the market for them, which I'm not convinced they are.
Yeah. Could you imagine the day that we like open our phone screen up and go, Google acquires what? Like, again, I've done it so many times this last year when it's Microsoft have bought Activision
Bethesda.
Blizzard, Sony acquired Bungie. There's so many times at Tomb Raider, even just the other week. Embracer Group pick up Tomb Raider and a bunch of other IP. Every time I've opened my phone and went, well, shit. So I don't put it, it's not beyond believability, but there needs to be big changes higher up the ladder where they go, right, guys, are we in or are we out when it comes to the games industry? How much are we committed to this industry that makes billions and billions of dollars, the biggest multimedia outlet industry in the world, and it's only going to get bigger? Are we in or are we out? We've got the money to get in, but are we chips on the table, revealing our show of hands, really?
I think Google buying EA would be one of them watershed moments. I know we've had a lot of these big deals, but I still think the biggest shock deal of them all is still Microsoft buys Bethesda. That was that was the one that kind of went, oh God, what the hell's going on now? And that's that is the deal that kind of started this consolidation. Google that buys EA would be on that level.
Yeah. Even if it was just a future proof.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be Stadia buys EA. I think this would be Google buys EA.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I don't think any of these purchases would be under the Stadia banner.
And honestly, I'm not currently convinced that even if Google bought 100% of EA, that you'd see all EA games come to Stadia.
Yes,
it sucks to say that, but you just have to look at the AT&T stuff with Batman Arkham's. Like, it's literally running on the servers.
Yeah, and you can't do it.
Yeah.
Moving on from EA then, we've got plenty of other big companies to talk about. Who else do you fancy for a potential merger and/or acquisition or investment?
I want to talk about Ubisoft, but I just kind of want to gloss through them because we're always talking about Ubisoft and it gets a bit boring. Ubisoft, I think, a very similar situation to EA, to be honest. They're trying to sell themselves. I think they've got a stronger relationship with Google, but Ubisoft are very much even more. We don't care where you play our games, but as long as you play our games. I think they're more primed for white label, for immersive stream, rather than actually be bought out.
Yeah, well, they already have the Ubisoft Plus running on Stadia across Luna. Would it benefit Stadia to have, or Google, to have all of those under the umbrella? Yeah, you're getting a ton of studios who are in a bit of a lull at the moment. If you purchase them, that could keep heading south, or it might invigorate them to do better stuff, maybe taking the pressures of Ubisoft's turnaround time and sharing assets. But again, you would only be acquiring tons of talent and studios that have got a rich heritage and history. Probably for a similar price as well. I think they'd be going for a similar price as EA would.
If Google bought Ubisoft, that would kind of probably solve their in-house development crisis, to be honest, overnight. Because while I do criticise Ubisoft for all the games be the same and stuff, you can put that down to their current leadership. if Google brought in different leadership and started going to different studios, right? We want you to start. We're going to take away the production line a bit. We want you to embrace a bit more creativity in developing your games, so it doesn't always feel like a Ubisoft title. To expand because we know Ubisoft have the talent to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah.
Ooh, yeah, Ubisoft again. They fought off the Vivendi kind of hostile takeover a few years ago. That was a hostile takeover where what we're kind of proposing is a mutual agreement here. Mm-hmm. And they have such a great relationship with Google. I think if any big third-party ones were for sale, it would be smart probably for Google to just use their existing relationship to invest in Ubisoft. And again, it doesn't need to be full-out purchase. I think you're totally right in saying a smaller investment of capital just to help support and financially safeguard their future allows them to make games. But within that deal, you have that caveat of you need to bring your games to the platform. And that's how it will organically help Stadia grow over time. Theoretically,
let's say Ubisoft sell 49% of their shares to Google. What then they do effectively have to do, Ubisoft would still, Isgimon would still be in control. He's still got, Ubisoft's current team still have 51%. They can still, because of that, they can still publish wherever they want to publish. It would, I think they'll put a guarantee into the purchase that they have to publish to Stadia, which they're intent on doing anyway. And it gives them that protection, because if a big publisher comes in for them, then Google sat around the table as well. By dint of being by being a big shareholder. It's like, so if Sony wants to talk about buying the rest of the shares, they can do so with Google around that board table. So it gives that protection.
Ubisoft in particular, like some of the rumoured companies who were looking to acquire them were like random business investment firms that weren't entertainment game. I know Google aren't phenomenally great, but their history is in technology. They work right now with Pixels, Chromebooks, internet browser, Stadia. They have lots of divisions, cloud powered technology. A random business investor group from the random arse end of nowhere in the United States does not interest me in taking over Ubisoft. I don't think it's in their best interest. So Google having that share.
I don't want a hedge fund. It's just a bunch of random blokes in suits in Wall Street running a games company, because I want people who are passionate about technology, passionate about games, because in the end of the day, while it is a business, it's also an art form, and I think to run a games company, you need to appreciate both sides of it.
Yeah, completely.
If you only appreciate the art form, you're not going to be able to make the deals that you need to do to keep your games on the market. If you only appreciate the business side, you're going to try and milk the hell out of it, and we're going to be microtransaction city.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But pivoting away from Ubisoft, though, I think what we've kind of alluded to with both of those big third-party publishers and developers is investment could just be a really good, smart move for Google. And I think investing in something similar to the way the Embracer Group have, they keep cropping up in the news. We cover it constantly on the show because they acquire studios, but they have a very hands-off approach. All of the studios under their banner, which now includes the Square Enix, Crystal Dynamics, they've got THQ, Volition, Deep Silver Studios, Fish Labs, all of these companies and IP. But Embracer just kind of sit back and let all the studios do their own thing.
They have their own operating groups, which kind of manage the individual studios, and Embracer kind of basically holding company for it. They're almost 4 or 5 companies. I think it was something 10 different operational groups or something ridiculous.
Oh, there's plenty. It's almost akin, Richie.
We did an episode on this.
It's almost akin to Alphabet overseeing all different divisions of Google. So what's to say Stadia or Google Cloud or whatever immersive games collection industry, whatever you want to call it, they could just pick up Embracer, invest in Embracer, take over all this IP and studios, and just have a guaranteed output on your platform of there might not be the AAA games, but you know what? We've got they've got Tomb Raider now.
Yeah.
Save the Gecko, #. But I just think, it's a good way of getting in, saying, all the games will come out on other platforms still, but like you said, Richie, it's got that income. I believe the Embracer Group will have much more profit coming in from video games than this white labelling stuff we'll have with an AT&T deal. Surely. With
the AT&T deal, I would agree, but I think, we talked about a few episodes ago about, say, potentially Disney getting involved. I think that would be potentially a lot more lucrative for Google than Embracer. Although
True.
Embracer, I think it might be. I think Embracer would overvalue themselves because they're such a growth company at the moment. They've got so many studios. They just bought literally they're buying stuff off Square Enix now. That's the level they are now. They are now in the game of AAA. Like the Square Enix deals are definitely put. Before then, I think they were on the verge. Now they're definitely in the AAA market.
Yeah, of course.
But they also go all the way down to indie style games. So they're almost like you could almost run an entire industry on Embracer. But because they're so growth, I think if you're an investor in the Embracer group, you're not selling cheap right now.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, there was the financial report came out last week, and they're down by about $500 million on revenue.
Okay,
so,
$500 million. There you go.
Yeah, but then again, Google, they have just spent loads of money on acquisitions over the last year or so that's obviously impacted their bottom line a little bit.
They're down on revenue, but they have just acquired a lot of potentially very lucrative assets.
Yeah, they're stacking the future essentially,
but that could
which Google should be doing. Google should be stacking for the future of this platform. That could
be an investment thing. Maybe you do 49% shares for $500 million, so you write off the debt.
Yeah,
and then it's just profit from there up. Yeah.
And again, this is kind of when we look at all these companies, isn't it interesting? We talk about EA, we talk about Ubisoft and Embracer, and we're going to discuss a few more. They're all planning for their future in the video games industry. And aside from white labeling, the honest truth is Google Stadia, Phil Harrison, they've not spoke about the future of this platform in over a year.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's sometimes the community, content creators, journalists, it's why Stadia's kind of just like a bit of a laughing stock at the moment, because they're just not talking about the product like it doesn't even exist. Even in the latest article we covered in the Sounds of Stadia podcast from Forbes about immersive stream games and the Control partnership, they referred to Stadia running on immersive stream for games when that's how you talk about your own product. And it just makes you wonder, like, when are they genuinely going to come out? When am I going to read a Bloomberg article, a Forbes article, something on IGN about Stadia in 2022 and beyond looks like? Because it's just deafening silence. And I do really question, as a business, where is their investment at? Because all these companies we're discussing are spending millions and millions and millions to stay alive and function in this industry.
Cases.
Billions to stay alive and relevant in this industry. And Google seemingly just sit here going, we'll tell you about it at some point. Let the years roll by. Have an indie game. Yeah.
Talking about a company that seems to be just kind of sat on things. The Pachinko Kings themselves, Konami. I'll bring these up because I think it's an interesting use case, because a lot of the cases we could talk about are quite similar in a lot of sense. Konami different. Konami has some really great IP that they're seemingly happy to do not much with. I could see this almost being a Square Enix Embracer Group style deal, where you're not buying Konami, you're buying their IP off them, and potentially their game studios. And this might be good if the right number. This might be good for Konami, because they seem a bit lukewarm at best on the video game industry. A bag of cash gets them out of it. They pass on the IP. You take it.
We're done. Yeah,
we're out.
I think that can be said for Konami, and my issue. We've touched on it before in previous shows as well. But I think any Japanese company, I think, would be very averse to selling anything to a big American conglomerate company, especially Google, because everything's so in-house in Japan, and we said before it's family oriented and ran. It could happen.
I agree on stuff they're trying to protect, but if it's an industry they're trying to feels like they're trying to get out of, if they don't care about this IP anymore, do they just want rid?
But then, if from an investment standpoint, though, if they get the IP, what would Google do with that? Would they get the development studios too? Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? They've been so dormant for so long, we don't really know what they're capable of.
In my hypothetical here is that Google will be picking up the development studios as well as the IP. So basically, anything Konami still has outstanding to do with video games, to buy all of that. And then Konami are basically then just out of the gaming industry.
Yeah.
I personally think that's more likely to happen with Sony instead of Google. and I think that is actually likely. Because, I mean, we are talking... It's Metal Gear Solid's Konami, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think
Metal Gear,
Sony... Castlevania. Both I've got well reviewed on PlayStation, actually.
Could you imagine a Bloodborne Castlevania style game?
Oh, God, yeah. See,
Yeah.
I could really see, like... What would Naughty Dog do with Metal Gear Solid?
Be so
With Kojima
good.
associated.
Be so good.
Maybe
So
not
good.
produced by Kojima, but he's involved.
The executive producer or something like that.
Yeah. But I
Cool.
wouldn't be surprised if Konami is the next big... Well, I say big. I don't really know how big Konami is right now.
The acquisition.
The next noteworthy acquisition.
Yeah. My money is on either Konami gets snapped up by Sony and they go, "Way, we're going to reboot." Like I said, we're going to reboot Metal Gear Solid or remake or remaster or bring out another entry, whatever that looks like, with Kojima involved, or Square, the remnants of Square Enix's studios for Final Fantasy stuff. They'll do that much exclusive partnership with Sony. They're just going to be brought in the fold and go, "Yeah, welcome to PlayStation Studios. Keep doing your Japanese funky stuff.
Yeah.
Exclusive to PlayStation.
We'll buy your studios. We'll buy your gaming IP.
Yeah, they're ours." And Castlevania Bloodborne, absolutely love it. That'd be awesome. But I think that's just off the table with Google, as with a lot of Japanese companies like Bandai Namco. I think they're doing their own thing. They've got a bunch of partnerships. Capcom, again, they're not huge, but they've got enough in the tank to just... and they keep making games, to be fair. I don't think they're that interested.
Bandai Namco, another one, they've got their finger in a lot of different pies outside the video game industry. So a lot of the Bandai Namco IP, they're involved in that IP in other media as well.
Yeah.
So it's... I think they're in a different case to something like EA and Ubisoft, who are games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, games. The only kind of the big other one really is Warner Brothers, I'd probably say, just for the fact that they've actively been looking for sale, like AT&T, Warner Media. They kind of every other year it seems like they go through this phase where they go, we want to sell, we don't want to sell, we want to get rid of, we don't want to get rid of. And now the kind of the Arkham Gotham Knights is on the horizon. The Suicide Squad is.
It feels like they need that. They're underside and they just need that push.
Yeah, they've got Hogwarts Legacy. There's a lot of stuff that's due out imminently, but do they want the sale to go through before these games launch or after? And I know they've kind of settled a bit at the moment. Now all their assets are in the right places and they've restructured, but that tells me that there's such uneasiness behind the scenes that if someone came in with a paycheck and went, "We'll take all that IP off your hands," and I could see it happening. If
you're an exec at Warner at the moment, you're looking how the video game industry is going. You might be going, we're probably going. Someone is going to come to the table with a big offer. Are we committed? What's our number? I think I'd be surprised if the execs at Warner don't have a number in mind that if an offer comes in above that, they go, yes, okay.
Yeah, I would as well. And they have that many large franchises. They just haven't really got the games out in recent years. Like we know Rocksteady have been working on this one for like 7 years. We don't know what's happening with the Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor. I know they're working on a Wonder Woman game now, so they're fortunate enough to have the IP, and they have a few studios. And these are one of the biggest disappointments for me in Stadia is that like we haven't seen any of their games. I mean, they haven't put much out, to be fair, as I was saying, but it just feels like we need more of their titles on the platform, and a great way to get that would be invest in them and say, look, bring us the next Lord of the Rings game, bring us the next Suicide Squad game, bring us the Batman Arkham games, because guess what? One of them is already running on the Stadia tech. It's an easy port. Just bring it across with a bit of investment.
Yeah, again, I almost think that it feels Microsoft for me, the Warner deal, a potential Warner deal.
Ooh, you do.
I don't think that so big of a publisher that anyone's going to go in for them hard now. I don't know. I think it might just because they're both American companies. I think Microsoft might be a bit more interested, and also with them Warner tend to mainly focus on single player action adventure
until
now.
Next,
and they seem to focus on the sort of stuff that Microsoft are maybe lacking a bit in, but Sony is strong in.
Yeah.
Sony seem to be going for more multiplayer-focused studios at the moment. Microsoft seem to be going for single-player stuff.
The only caveat to all that is I feel like Microsoft have done that much graft in the last 2 years with Bethesda and now Activision and spent literally nearly $100 billion. I don't think they're going to be spending any big bucks anytime soon. Just whether that they've got the regulators breathing down the neck and they're saying like, oh, is this like a monopoly thing going on? Or just if they have, like, does Phil Spencer literally have an unlimited checkbook? Or at some point is someone going to go, Phil, you've spent a lot. Let's just reel it in and see if we can get some money back from these investments before we go open up the war chest again.
We need to start seeing some return. I think this might be why EA and Ubisoft are still on the table.
Yeah,
there might be we might have actually come to the end of this phase of consolidation. Maybe in a couple of years' time, once like some games have actually come out from these on the backs of these mergers and acquisitions, we might see another phase where your EAs, your Ubisofts, your Warners, your Konamis might come in a couple of years. Although I think Konami, the numbers are going to be it's not going to be Activision Blizzard numbers.
Yeah. So then
they're more likely because I think they're smaller.
Yeah. So that leaves it ripe for acquisition or investment from someone else who has an absolute war chest of money, who's in the games industry, who's looking to grow their platform.
It's opportunism. That's what it is. It's like you need to look at the market and go, if you wait too long, Sony and Microsoft are going to be back at the table.
Yeah. You got to follow the trends, right? Any business follows the trends. And if all of your competition are buying up studios, how can you sit there and go, nah, we don't need to do that?
Well, I mean, Sony and Microsoft tend to get on quite well, but I can guarantee every time one of them makes a purchase, the other's having a board meeting about it.
Oh, 100%.
Because it's like, these are big acquisitions and they will be sat there at times talking like we are right now about EA, about Ubisoft, about Embracer, about all these publishers and going, do we think the other guy's targeting that? Is it worth us looking at it?
Yeah. Well, if you look back even just at the last year or so, could you imagine being at working at Microsoft and you're waking up, you're ready to start your day, and then you see the news that Tomb Raider's been acquired, and you thought, oh shit, who's bought that? Does that mean we don't have Tomb Raider in our library going forward? Like, what? Oh, it's only Embracer, right? We might be okay. Right, oh shit, Bungie's been bought. What? Does that mean we lose Destiny? No. And then on the flip side, Sony going, what? Call of Duty? What?
Yeah.
And then Google is sat there going, Bethesda's been bought. Okay. What's happening? Google's library isn't going to get Starfield. It isn't going to get the next Fallout. Because with what happened, the new Indiana Jones game, it's not going to happen. The new Wolfenstein game, it ain't going to happen. That's 4 big AAA games that might have been in the pipeline that aren't.
Yeah.
Investment is critical for success. You got to spend money to make money. You really, really do. Indie games are great, but they won't keep the platform alive long term. They will not. That is a fact.
Yeah, I mean, the last point I want to bring up is I sometimes think that Google might be in a bit of shock by the gaming industry, how fast moving it is, compared to other tech industries. Sales of a phone will probably you have that initial spike and they'll probably be steady throughout the rest of the year. You don't get that in the gaming industry. You get that initial spike, and if that spike isn't big enough, your game's a flop because the next thing's coming, and the next thing's coming, and the next thing's coming.
Yeah,
and that you need to find a way to sustainably keep these things coming, which means to succeed, you need a critical mass of players. Without that critical mass of players, you can't get AAA. To bring in AAA titles is not cost effective, which then just limits your growth.
Yeah,
which is what I think we're going through. I mean, we know from Epic. Epic would have been willing to bring Fortnite over if Google's working on Windows. But they look at it and go, it's not worth the time to put an effort to put the port in. If it's on a Windows port, then it's over and it's in line with the rest of everything.
Yeah, but it's just funny to think back over the years when Google obviously had the plans and you had Phil Harrison on stage, you had Sundar Pichai on stage talking about what Google's tech and cloud and all of the selling the dream essentially of what Stadia could be. And then maybe a few months later, Phil Harrison has to go knock on his door and go, Bethesda's being bought by Microsoft. Fast forward another year, Activision, we don't really work with them that much, but they've also gone. And then a few months later, Tomb Raider's also gone to, like, all these little movements. And Phil Harrison has to go and knock on Sundar's door and say, yeah, this games industry malarkey that we're involved in, can I borrow 100 billion to just keep up the pace with the competition? And he just goes, no. And
let's have a look at your monthly profit, your quarterly profits for last year. Like,
let's get the analytics up. And let's close down Stadia Games and Entertainment because they're not making any money yet. It's like, whoa, wait, Sundar. It takes about 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years? What? Can it? Sack them all. Which, Richie, it brings us kind of to a close, I guess, with this one, is if they're not going to invest in these studios, is it worthwhile rebooting Stadia Games and Entertainment in some capacity? Or is that just it's never going to happen now, based on the failings of the original idea?
I think it's never going to happen, but I think they should have kept the Stadia Games and Entertainment open as a publisher, not as a developer. So then they could have commissioned existing studios to... Bear in mind, that closure happened before the recent wave of massive acquisitions.
Yeah.
They could have used that to commission exclusive titles and published on the Stadia Games and Entertainment. Like we've seen both Microsoft and Sony and even Nintendo commission games to be published, and then they've published it, but it's been made by... Technically, Pokemon is a third-party title.
It's just Game Freak, right?
Pokemon. Well, I think Nintendo owns shares in Game Freak, but it's like it's developed by Game Freak but published by Nintendo.
Yeah. I mean, again, they could have brokered a deal. Like, look at PlayStation. They had a 3-game deal with Quantic Dream, Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human, and then now they're out, and they're out making Star Wars Eclipse. But does Star Wars Eclipse come to Stadia? Like, again, what I'd love to know is just, are those conversations happening, and how invested or reinvested do Stadia need to be to genuinely compete? Because this year has shown us so far that they can't even get the third-party games. They ain't got first-party. They ain't getting third-party. They don't get every indie title. Some indie titles they get are then snapped up by PlayStation anyway. It just makes me wonder, as we said right at the beginning, where are the games coming from? Because you need them for the platform to grow and survive. You need the big games. And they've been so silent for the last year or so. It just has me wondering as a fan, like, what does the future hold? And the longer the silence goes on, the general feeling in the community is that less people are playing, less games are coming, less people are subscribing to Pro, therefore there's less money being reinvested. Like, how long is that sustainable? How long is that really sustainable for?
I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments. But that's all we have time for this week. If you've liked the video, hit that like button and consider becoming a member for as little as 99p, where you can get early access to this very show. If you've got a topic or an idea you want us to discuss, let us know in the comments of this video or in our Discord server. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Richie.
I've been Chris.
Quest completed.